It began with a whisper in the palace corridors, a murmur too dangerous to say aloud, yet too explosive to ignore. King Charles III, the man who swore to uphold the ancient traditions of the British crown, is now accused of something so incendiary that it could fracture the very foundations of the monarchy, turning his back on Christianity in favor of Islam. The accusation, which surfaced after a series of closed-door meetings with high-profile Islamic leaders, has sent shockwaves from Westminster Abbey to the furthest reaches of the Commonwealth. While official palace statements dismiss the claims as baseless, insiders are telling a different story, a story of quiet shifts in royal priorities, calculated alliances, and an undercurrent of religious diplomacy that some say borders on betrayal. Those who have worked closely with the king describe a man deeply fascinated by other faiths, particularly Islam. It's not just respect, one palace aide confided under strict anonymity. It's almost as if he's trying to distance himself from the Anglican Church, the very church he is sworn to protect. According to this source, private gatherings between the king and influential Islamic figures have increased over the past year, often unreported by the mainstream press but meticulously recorded in palace logs. The timing could not be more volatile. The Church of England is already facing a crisis of faith, with declining attendance, political pressures, and internal divisions. For the supreme governor of that church to be even perceived as favoring another religion is nothing short of an earthquake. The Archbishop of Canterbury has reportedly sought urgent clarification, though insiders say his requests for a private audience have been delayed multiple times. Rumors first gained traction after a controversial speech in which King Charles spoke of the beauty and depth of Islamic traditions, while only briefly mentioning Christianity. To his critics, this was not a slip of the tongue, it was a deliberate signal. Conservative members of Parliament have privately expressed outrage, with one senior MP telling us, "The King's duty is clear. His loyalty is to Christianity, and if he cannot uphold that, the very legitimacy of the crown comes into question." Behind the scenes, factions within the palace are reportedly forming. On one side, senior advisors who see Charles's outreach as a diplomatic necessity in a multicultural Britain. On the other, staunch royalists who believe that diluting the monarchy's Christian identity is tantamount to treason. The Queen Consort, Camilla, is said to be walking a tightrope, attempting to support her husband while calming the growing unrest among the court's most traditional members. The most damning allegations come from leaked memos suggesting that the king has been exploring ways to modernize royal religious ceremonies to be more inclusive of non-Christian faiths. One draft proposal reportedly included an unprecedented change to the coronation oath, removing the explicit promise to defend the Protestant faith. Though Buckingham Palace insists such changes were never seriously considered, the leak has only fueled suspicion. Meanwhile, the public reaction has been fierce. Social media is ablaze with calls for the king to reaffirm his Christian faith, while others argue that his interfaith approach is a sign of progress. But in the court of public opinion, perception often outweighs truth, and the perception right now is one of a monarch caught between two worlds. The shadow of abdication looms in hushed conversations. Could this be the controversy that forces Charles to step aside for Prince William? Some royal commentators believe it's a distinct possibility, especially if William positions himself as the defender of Britain's Christian heritage. William has always been careful to align with tradition, one veteran royal watcher noted. If Charles alienates the core base of royal support, it's William who will inherit their loyalty. Complicating matters is the geopolitical dimension. Britain's relationships with Islamic nations are both lucrative and delicate, involving billions in trade deals, defense contracts, and energy partnerships. Critics fear that Charles's personal leanings could blur the line between diplomacy and religious favoritism, risking both domestic unity and international credibility. And then there's the Meghan and Harry factor. The exiled Sussexes have already been accused of undermining the monarchy's image for profit, but now some believe they may seize on this faith controversy to further damage the crown. Rumors are swirling that Harry's upcoming memoir could contain passages about his father's spiritual journey, potentially framing it as a betrayal of his coronation vows. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere is said to be tense, even paranoid. Staff have been warned against discussing the matter with the press, and at least one junior aide has been dismissed for leaking information. The king, for his part, has remained publicly silent on the allegations, attending events with his usual composure but avoiding any statements about religion. To some, his silence is a dignified refusal to dignify baseless rumors. To others, it's a sign that there is something to hide. In the streets outside the palace gates, protesters have begun gathering, some waving Bibles, others carrying signs that read, "Faith before crown." The clash of voices is growing louder, and it's becoming clear that this is not a storm that will pass quickly. The monarchy has survived wars, divorces, and scandals, but never before has its spiritual foundation been so openly questioned. For centuries, the Crown and the Church of England have been intertwined, each lending the other legitimacy. If that bond is perceived to be breaking, the entire institution could be left exposed. As one senior courtier put it, it's not just about religion, it's about identity. If the king is no longer seen as the protector of our faith, then what is he? For now, King Charles remains on the throne, but his grip may be slipping. Every whispered rumor, every leaked memo, every ambiguous speech chips away at the trust that is the lifeblood of monarchy. And in a world where public opinion shifts with a single headline, one more misstep could turn whispers into a roar that even a king cannot silence.